least 1.4 million businesses being run by couples, people in romantic as well as business partnerships. On today's episode of Sound Advice, we're going to chat to Harriet Hastings, founder of Biscuiteers, the biscuit gifting company, about how to make a success of having your spouse in the business, how to manage that dynamic and avoid clashes, what rules to put in place to preserve some kind of balance between work and personal life. I'm your host, Bex Byrne-Callender. Welcome, Harriet. Thanks for coming on the show.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
So I want to go back to the beginning, because before your husband joined the business, this was sort of your baby, your entity. He was doing something else. So I want to know about that conversation around the kitchen table where you said, darling, I know I have a fantastic job, but I want to go into business and how about we use some savings to do it? Tell me about that conversation and how that kind of began this journey towards this family company.
I suppose it was a bit more organic than it might seem, in the sense that I had left my full-time job. I just had my fourth baby, and I think I just kind of slightly ran out of steam. You know, it was a kind of big job with long hours. And so I was doing sort of consultancy, and I was also helping him in reverse with his business. So Stevie has a catering and events business called Lettuce. And so I was helping him with that, and then it just began to, and I suppose in a way probably what happened is I got a bit sort of itchy feet and wanted to do something else. And I also thought there was a real opportunity in food gifting. It was sort of slightly what I observed and what people were giving me, and what I was very interested in e-commerce. I'd run the tech division of a consumer tech business through the dot-com boom. And what was interesting about that was not only the opportunities that e-commerce was obviously bringing to start your own business or your own brands, but also it really exposed me to a sort of much more kind of entrepreneurial way of looking at things, because everyone was coming in with sort of new business ideas. There was a lot of funding available at the time. So I guess what I really wanted to do was to create an e-commerce brand. That was my sort of ambition. And I was very lucky because Stevie obviously had commercial kitchens and understood about food production. So in a sense, it felt like we had good match skills. So he's all about the production and the operations, and I'm much more about, product and marketing and sales.
Did he join straight away, or did you sort of get Biscuiteers up and running and then he joined a bit later? What was the timeline like? We incubated Biscuiteers for the first couple of months out of his kitchen. So to that extent it was, and we were borrowing resources actually from Lettuce to get it going. And I think that there was a sort of, the difference is really that Biscuiteers got a lot bigger in the last few years. And then he came over very much full-time to work in it, which also coincided with my eldest daughter taking over the running of Lettuce. And I suppose that was the sort of opportunity really for him to kind of completely out. Whereas before that, he was sort of one foot in both businesses, effectively. Okay, I understand.
And it wasn't a kind of moment when we all said, we think you should come and work in the business. He was always involved because it was always a shared endeavour. It was just more a question of how much time we were putting into different things.
And you mentioned that he's very much got his sphere within the business, so he does kind of production and operations. Was that very important to have clearly defined roles where it became a natural kind of division of labour and you weren't going to step on each other's toes?
Yeah, I think it is important actually. And we are very different people. We have very different skill sets. And so when we're working in the business, obviously we're both part of the kind of executive team, but we work quite separately. And I think that is one of the sort of saving things, really. It's an interesting dynamic because I'm very much leading the marketing and the sales, and actually I also to some extent front the business, hence been doing interviews like this. He wouldn't dream of doing that. But he has very much been the person who's conceived and designed, for instance, the manufacturing processes, because, that's been one of the big challenges about Biscuiteers, has been how to design a manufacturing process that would enable us to hand ice biscuits on the scale that we do.
But tell me about that, because you mentioned that you started this business because you were fascinated by e-commerce and tech. But then on the flip side, each biscuit is iced by hand, which seems like the absolute antithesis of having a high-tech business. It's beautifully done, but that must be a big strain on the business. So how do you do that?
Well, I mean, you're obviously completely right. I think that when we started the business, we hadn't really tackled, let's say, those problems and those challenges. We were very excited by the idea and the product that we were creating. And it's been the biggest learning curve. And it's been really, and also building a manufacturing business is a really hard thing to do. So the bit that I do, which is building a brand, I consider to be relatively easier than the challenges of, building manufacturing on this scale and also manufacturing in London, which is also has its own challenges. So I also feel I sound ridiculously naive to say this. It was a while ago, but I honestly don't think that I actually realised on sort of, day one that I was actually launching a manufacturing business. I mean, I knew I was launching a gifting business. I was kind of completely clear about that, but the sort of, we didn't worry about that in a way. And it obviously in a sense, the problem grew as the business grew.
But could you have sort of outsourced that bit? Or did you perhaps try and then they weren't as tasty as you would have liked? Or did you not go that route at all?
I would have. It's not that we wouldn't have been open to that route, but we've never found anybody who knows how to do what we do. I mean, there are big problems of being, the first people to ever attempt to hand ice 3 million biscuits a year because there's no one else who can do it. So, there isn't like I can go to some factory like I could if I was, doing something else and say, here's the recipe. It's not just a recipe. It's not the manufacture of the biscuits themselves that's challenging. It's the actual decoration of the biscuits and how that you do that. And a lot of the IP in our business is around that process that we've created.
Oh, I understand, because you can't just go to McVitie's or say, hey,
Yes.
Mr. Kipling, help me out, because it's specifically made to order a lot of these biscuits and they are personalised and they're also changing all the time. I saw on your Instagram that you had, for example, during Wimbledon, loads of amazing Wimbledon biscuits, and it's just, you must have to be so fast to bring out these designs to tally with events that are going on in the year.
Well, I mean, you'd be surprised. Actually, we have to work quite far in advance. I mean, obviously, we know what's coming, so we will have started Christmas, for instance, in February. We start Christmas on the 1st of February, it being the kind of biggest occasion, and we design collections seasonally. That's we in that sense, it's a bit like a fashion business, and we present ourselves like that. I mean, there's the sort of language that we use. So we're always designing. So at the moment we are I think we're doing Valentine's Day at the moment.
Okay.
So it has to be because of the media cycle to some extent. We have to be, we're presenting both to retailers and to media our Christmas collection now.
Okay.
So it has to be photographed ready, catalogues, everything.
I see. Okay. And how far in advance can you actually start to make the biscuits? Because in terms of sort of shelf life and everything, how far ahead can you prepare, especially for Christmas, which I know is massive for you guys?
We start what we call Christmas manufacture from the beginning of August.
Okay.
We actually start with the all year round, funnily enough. And then we're probably fully in Christmas production on the 1st of September.
Okay.
And it is because that's the only way that we can get the kind of volumes that we need without it obviously employing a crazy number of people. And they do have long shelf life, yes. So 6 to 9 months.
Okay. And in terms of the variety of biscuits available, do you have to keep that quite spare, like quite limited in order to make life easier? I know that you've got lots of designs, but the actual dough that you're baking, does it kind of stick to one recipe, or do you have like a whole host of options in that way as well?
We have 4 or 5. So we have throughout the main recipes that we use are gingerbread, chocolate, lemon. Throughout the year, gingerbread obviously a lot more at Christmas. We also have vegan recipes.
Okay.
So kind of 4 or 5 different doughs that we're using.
Oh, that's interesting. And how did you come up with that kind of core variety then, core offering? Was it basically people asking you for things, or did you test things and then the sales went mad for them and you thought, right, we'll keep that? How did you kind of iron out which flavors people wanted?
I suppose there was a bit of, just trialing it, and we're always optimizing our recipes. We have quite a big technical team here, so we do work quite hard at constantly trying to get the balance of so the lemon recipe is actually quite a new one. Okay. So we were doing a lot more vanilla biscuits, but we felt that the vanilla wasn't lasting as well. Okay. And because it's not such a strong flavour and it was quite sweet, whereas the lemon, so we only brought the lemon in, I think, about 2 years ago.
Okay.
So we are always thinking about it, but what we try to do is give people options. So if you're buying one, say you're buying our butterfly designs, you'll only be able to buy them in the dough that we make them in. But if you don't like lemon dough, say, and that's what they're in, there will be other designs. But what's the only way we can really run the business? Otherwise, we'd have just mad number of SKUs,
Because it struck me that you have quite a lot of corporate customers who perhaps would come back every year, and then they would want something slightly different every year. They'd want to feel like they were bringing something fresh to their teams or to their clients, and that would be something that you would need. That would be a need you'd need to meet.
Around the Christmas season, I think that's right, and that's why we have quite diversified. So you will find at Christmas that we already sell a lot of macarons. That's quite a big area for us. But we also sell shortbread, hand-iced chocolates, mince pies, Christmas cakes, So if you can ice it, basically, we've probably tried it, is the general principle.
You're making me hungry. How much of turnover comes in over sort of broadly the Christmas period then? Because it sounds like that must be about more than half, maybe?
No, it's not that much. And we work quite hard to make sure that it isn't that much, because so I think it's heavily weighted, 25-30%. But we very much, for the shape of the business, need it to be an all year round gifting business. So obviously Christmas is the biggest occasion for the year, but there are many other occasions throughout. I mean, where we're sitting right now, we're doing loads of thanks teacher. Thank you to the teacher. I mean, that for us is quite a big occasion at this time of the year. But we also have corporate customers who buy from us throughout the year for different reasons. So product launches, employee engagement, loyalty gifting, quite a big one as well. Okay. And wholesalers. So wholesalers buy from us throughout the year as well.
That's really interesting advice for anyone who's thinking or has a seasonal business, in ways that you can kind of think creatively to find those sort of spikes in sales throughout the year, because otherwise it would be too risky. You'd be overloading yourself too far.
It's not just a risk. And I mean, it is a problem. I mean, I think anybody who runs a seasonal business, and anyone who's running a retail business, is to some extent going to be running a seasonal business and going to be facing the problems that we all face, of that you have to build your stock fast, at early September, and then so you get a real dip in your cash at that time of the year. So it is very tough to sort of work through that. So that's why the more work that we can sort of pilot or find ways, different channels, different ways of building business in the first 6 months of the year is what we aim to do.
And did you and your husband used to have to muck in? I'm imagining when the business was young and you had these huge orders coming in, suddenly you'd be both grabbing icing bags and like, we're ready. Or was it always more calm and collected than that?
No, definitely not. But it was more at the end of Christmas dispatch, actually, is the more memorable thing. Because on our website, you can choose your dispatch day. You'll just get these huge days, where you'll suddenly have 5,000 parcels going out on one day. And because everybody, for some reason, has decided they want them all to go out on the 16th of December, so. And that is a really challenging thing to work out, because obviously we're managing stock all the time and stock is selling through. So you have to have really robust systems. If you've sold that stock to somebody in, the beginning of November, they have to be, top of the queue on the 16th of December. Actually, that's really quite a complicated thing to organise.
Oh, so does your warehouse have like really high-tech sort of ways of labelling, like which biscuits need to go? Because you must also be selling like the biscuits in order, so that you have the kind of freshest ones come at the back, like in a supermarket. You know, you hunt at the back, and they're the later sell by dates at the back, and then the ones are pushed to the front. Is that how it works in biscuits?
Sort of, yeah. They slide down effectively, yes. So that you put your new stock in the back exactly like that, as it like most warehouse systems. I mean, the way we work on a barcode system, like most people, we work on dispatch days actually. So on to today, basically all the orders that are due to be dispatched today, not ordered today, will all come up for them on the screens.
Okay.
The challenge of it is to make sure that, so if you've got your 5,000 orders, you want that to happen, but what you also want to happen is to get that the people who ordered it first get it first. Is kind of, because you do get it's inevitable occasional oversells and things, and we also forward allocate stock, which is really complicated. So we sell stock we haven't made.
Okay.
Because of the nature of our process. So if I'm selling stock, let's say the middle of November, that I know is going to be made, the week after next, but they don't want it dispatched until December, so that's okay.
Yeah, okay.
But it's okay provided the whole system works properly. Forward allocation is also a very complicated thing, it turns out to do.
It sounds like a lot of smart number crunching has to go into making sure the right number of biscuits get baked.
Well, it's smart systems. You get very dependent on very smart systems. And we did a massive tech upgrade 2 years ago, which we really needed because, if we hadn't done it, I think the wheels would have completely flown off. We're selling through so many different channels. We're selling through our own icing cafes. We're selling direct to corporates. We're selling to retailers, wholesale. And we are selling direct as well. And that's, and we're sort of moving stock around between these areas. So it can get quite, it gets complicated basically when you're incredibly busy as you are at Christmas.
And it must be a nightmare if anything goes wrong. So does it ever happen that, say, the Royal Mail strikes, for example, did that throw you off, or did you have a replacement delivery partner lined up? How did you manage that?
We do have replacement delivery partners, but in a way that wasn't really the point. The point was that the media said, you're not going to get your parcels. Everybody ran back to the high street. Good for the high street, I guess. We would expect the 2 weeks before Christmas to be our busiest of the entire year. I mean, those Royal Mail strikes cost us a fortune, and because people they lost faith, and we were obviously providing very kind of competitive courier deliveries. There wasn't actually a problem with us sending out the biscuits, but there was a problem in the sort of confidence of people shopping. So literally online retail in those 2 weeks before Christmas just fell off a cliff last year. And it was, that was probably one of the most challenging things that we've had to deal with.
Does that mean if there are future Royal Mail strikes, if you've got a marketing strategy where it's like, never mind Royal Mail, we'll still get you your biscuits, like what can you do to instill confidence?
Well, somebody said to me, I guess that's just, which doesn't make me feel much better at the time, it's just the cost of doing business. And I kind of know what they mean. It's like, that is sort of, there are bumps in the road. I believe that the Royal Mail strikes are totally resolved. I just couldn't even contemplate that happening again. I did quite a lot of interviews at the time, going on talk about it and saying it felt a bit like it was punishing business. You know what I mean? It wasn't that their right to go on strike, it was the timing of it.
Yeah.
It really did feel, we spent all year preparing for Christmas. It was like somebody just got, okay, I'll take it away.
Yeah. Yeah, that must have been an absolute kick in the teeth. I totally hear you on that. So at the beginning of the show, we talked a bit about how you run a business with a husband and wife team at the top. I'd like to get a little bit of your insight on how that works from a personal perspective. So do you and your husband talk about work all the time? Do you have rules in place, like after 8 p.m, we don't talk about it? Is that even possible? Can you share your approach to making it work?
I do think it is quite challenging, and I have heard other couples say things like that, like we don't talk about it at home. We've always talked about business at home, and I think it stems from the fact that even before we had Biscuiteers, we had lettuce. So we had a kind of a business in the family always. And then obviously we had Biscuiteers as well. And then now with my daughter running lettuce, that's also still this sort of family. So as a family, we're very used to running businesses. It's been a big part of our lives.
Okay.
And I guess I think what's the right answer to this question? I think we don't have rules in place because we're not those kind of people. If we did, we just break them. I think you do sometimes just have to learn when to just stop, because particularly if you're having I think the worst thing is actually if you're having an anxious time at business, it's that anxiety slipping into your personal life in a way because you're both oversharing those problems.
Right.
And I think those are actually the most difficult times. Because
then it's hard to get on with each other as people because you're so associated with the problem. And it's hard to see like where one thing ends and the problem begins.
Yeah, and I think also, obviously, we don't always take the same approach to things. And I sort of mentioned we are very different. I mean, I'm a very quite a bullish entrepreneur. I think I kind of rely on my optimism and my to drive the business, and I feel that as the kind of sort of leader of the business, and sets on the visible leader of the business, that I have to lead other people into that. So, and he approaches things much more cautiously, and I think that also comes out from the fact that he has run businesses for a very all his life, essentially. So he quite right believes that, unlike the way businesses sometimes run now, that businesses should be run for profit and they should be run well. So if, in other words, for me, when I would be like, this has got to be a growing business, that would be an obvious area of tension from us. Or it's very product dependent. And so it's about me wanting to keep the product very, very high end all the time. And obviously from his point of view, he's like, but it's also got to be produced productively. We have to make some money out of it. So there's, we're both on different sides of it. And I suppose what you hope is that becomes a good creative tension and some kind of middle ground is found.
I was going to say, can you give me an example of a particular point that you were opposed over, and then tell me how you resolved it, and whether it was then resolved so that you were both happy, or do you feel like that's quite tricky, that compromise?
I think one of the areas that we often disagree about is about, weirdly, it sounds very detailed, but it's a number of SKUs that we carry in the business.
Okay.
So from my point of view, from a marketing side, what keeps Biscuiteers in the conversation, which is really important if you're a consumer brand, is our ability to be responsive to events, seasons, and I think the newness of the product and the new product development that we put in and the seasonal launches also keep the marketing really fresh all the time. He would take the view that we just have too many SKUs, and it would be obviously far more efficient if you're making much less of a range of biscuits, which you're making just, the longer the runs you can make, the smaller the range.
Right.
And I would say that we still are in debate about this. So I'm not sure we ever kind of quite resolve it. But I know that he's not wrong. So we do try very hard to give an example. We're always putting new things on the website. The discipline should be you put new things on, you take something off.
Yeah.
Because you can get very carried away with all the lovely things you can make. I certainly can. And that is, I think, quite an important discipline. And the other thing we do is we try very hard to, so we have a sort of planning department. So when it goes down to the ISIS or goes down into production, we know how many, if you like, tins of biscuits we're expecting to get back. And if for whatever reason we're not producing them efficiently or fast enough, they come back, and this is very much sort of his approach, they come back into new product development to be optimized. Okay. Because we can possibly do quite small things that hopefully the consumer won't even see, that just make them much easier and faster for the ISIS to ice.
Oh, okay. What if there's a little crack or something? You can
a change of design technique. Oh, okay. There might be something in the design technique that they're finding hard.
Okay. Okay.
So it's basically, designing ice biscuits. So these are the ones that are going on the big production runs that we sell, on the website.
Okay.
That we can make small changes. So we're constantly optimizing our productivity. This is really tough times now. We're all struggling with, the increase, the cost. Our costs are all going up, costs of employing people, obviously, costs of packaging, costs of everything. Now, we don't want to have, as far as possible, to pass that on to
our customers, what we're trying to do is to lean into our productivity to really, and I think last year we did get about a 10-12% increase in productivity, which did offset those costs. Now this year it's going to be tougher again because we've probably got another 10% of cost increases that we have to absorb. So it's, that is the beating heart of the business, is trying to make sure that we do, keep it's all businesses are about this, it's about gross profit. But in our case, our gross profit is absolutely linked to how productively we can produce the biscuits.
That's really interesting, though, the idea that you try and find cost savings not through the obvious channels where it's sort of slimming down your workforce or cutting your marketing, but looking for kind of just how you can be more productive, more efficient. It just seems like a much better way to view these sort of savings, that you just get much better at doing what you're already good at.
Well, I think you probably have to do everything. I mean, I think everybody's got to run. There is an argument that people say, not we're in a recession yet, but in a recession, you run a leaner business.
Yeah.
So we do, our marketing, all of our channels have to pay back.
Yeah.
It's run in a very tight way. Obviously, you don't stop marketing because you don't stop marketing, that's kind of critical to the business. We can't really cut people in a way. We are an artisanal business. So we need people to make the biscuits. So that's not where the cut's going to come. So really our main option is to make them better.
And you mentioned that Lettuce Events, which was your husband's previous company, is now being run by your daughter. So there's these two businesses being run side by side. All the family is involved. So are there ever clashes? Are there ever huge rows with shouting up and down the stairs? Or have you managed to figure out a way to avoid that part of family confrontation?
I think we're quite a noisy family anyway, so we're not afraid of confrontation. I think that's the best way to put it, and not bothered by it enormously, so because it's quite short-lived. And Holly, she's done an absolutely amazing job with lettuce. It's grown so quickly over the last couple of years, but that's quite a stressful business. You're putting on corporate and private events as well, and she's doing all the kind of. Stevie's still a little bit involved, and he goes in half a day a week to help her. But I imagine, hard to say, that she, by growing up in the sort of hustle of running her own businesses, it comes more naturally to her.
Yeah. It must have rubbed off. They always say, when we interview entrepreneurs on this show, and they're like, oh, my dad or my mum ran a business and it was kind of second nature, it was in my blood, and they never thought of doing anything different, really, because it's what they saw. So it must be the same with your kids.
I think so. She's at the moment the only one, but we'll see where the others go. It's interesting, entrepreneurialism, I don't think it's for everybody. But I think the people who do enjoy it, what most people enjoy is the sort of their own having their own agency. It's definitely the reason I started a business, was because I had 4 kids and I wanted control over my own time. And starting my own business seemed like a good way to achieve that.
But don't you feel like there's a bit of an irony there, because you had a very busy, powerful job, and you wanted to be more flexible and control your own hours, but now you're running a really, really successful company, and I'm sure you've worked weekends and evenings, potentially even more so than you did in your old job. It's kind of, I don't know, I hear this a lot, where it's like, I wanted to have more control, but then I got control and I'm the hardest taskmaster I've ever had.
I think that's true, because obviously it's partly the way tech's developed. We could all be working all of the time. I've worked in some really weird places, at the time, and it come quite naturally to me, sitting at a paid club camp or something and working. I'll do it anywhere. I work in cars a lot because we do quite a lot of traveling. But I think it's different though, because I think it's your gig and it's your choice. That is ultimately a very different thing. And
creating businesses, I'm sure you've heard this a lot, it is a sort of form of active creation. For a lot of people, it becomes like another member of their family, and all the people that you work with. So I think it's that sort of sense of responsibility as well.
Yeah.
And commitment to it is just slightly different. And the one thing I would say, though, is looking back, I do think the early years of running a business are the most fun. I mean, I think that, it does get a lot bigger, and it does get a lot more scary and responsible. But whereas when you're starting and you're trying lots of things and things are working, and, I enjoy that bit a great deal.
It's less to lose as well, because you're kind of thinking, well, I hope this works and I'm going to do it, give my all. But, it's not like you're saying I've got 300 people's lifeline, livelihoods.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, exactly.
And on that note, you mentioned earlier how your role is to bring the positivity and to make sure that you're the one that has like the encouragement, motivating people. We can do this. I mean, how do you do that? Because you, like everyone, is, you're reading the headlines, and as you say, there are lots of pressures on the business. So how do you keep finding this positivity? How do you keep kind of digging down and finding this well of like motivation and determination that you can kind of make everyone around you also feel that way?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some people who work with you have to believe in your certainty. I mean, I would go that far as say, this is going to happen. This is going to work. One the way I do it is that I at some point just block out the kind of wider conversation around sort of macroeconomics, and I go, look, we've got in Biscuiteers an incredibly differentiated product, differentiated in every market, not just in the UK, and we have had to pivot the business actually in the last couple of years. So the balance between consumer and B2B has changed quite a lot, and we've gone far more into wholesale and corporate markets, and so that we're less overall reliant on the consumer market. And then what we've also done is we've looked at channels overseas is now our real kind of focus. And I think that's what you do. So if you think that you've got a great product, you find new channels to sell that product.
Okay.
So you don't get sucked down into, okay, the consumer market in the UK is really quite poor at the moment. You have to think sort of bigger and longer term.
So it's constructive positivity. You're not just saying, oh, everything's going to be fine.
Oh, no.
You're literally doing the things that mean you can be confident and you can say, hand on heart, we are going to be okay. So it's not sort of a veneer. It is genuinely how you feel.
Yeah, and I think the more strings you have to your bow, kind of slightly, it enables you to give that flexibility, because what you tend to find is that different bits of the business at different times are performing better for different reasons.
Okay. And is that especially important to have that diversity, that diversified sort of income stream when you're heading perhaps for a recession, when there are cost of living, cost of business, price rises? You need more, because a lot of companies tend to slim back down to a sole focus when there's like economic strife.
I think that I believe, essentially, that good products, we're in the gifting business, but we're in the, we're definitely it might be the luxury end, but we're affordable gifting. I believe that there's always a kind of place for that. We're not such a big business, that we need such. So I also, as it happens with Biscuiteers, we over-index as it happens in the southeast of England, which perhaps is to be expected. So one of our great challenges this year is to go, well, why are we doing more business in the north of England? There's no reason. It's just that we haven't given that the focus in the marketing. So I suppose what I'm trying to say is there are always opportunities. You just have to find the opportunities. And I think one of the difficulties actually is, particularly at the moment, the sort of relentlessness of kind of bad news around business. It makes you, does make that a great deal harder.
Yeah. So you just have to tune it out, sometimes just turn it off.
And, assuming that you do, as I do, believe in what you're doing. We have an incredibly loyal customer base who love what we do. So we have the benefit of having that kind of feedback. And we see
a lot of opportunities.
Harriet, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your advice and your experience with us today. Harriet is on LinkedIn, or you can check out the incredible biscuit designs at Biscuiteers Limited on Twitter or Instagram. To find the show notes and related goodies, head on over to sage.com/podcast. Catch you next week when we hear how to turn your profession and your craft into a thriving training business.